Hey guys, welcome back to Creating Careers Podcast. In our last episode, I sat down and talked with John Champion. And John shared with us a person that inspired him, and it was Sean Kirby. Sean is a director of photography for commercial and film shoots. While in this conversation, Sean really shared some great advice for people that are just getting started in the film industry. I know I personally benefited a lot from this conversation and greatly enjoyed it, and I think you will as well. Check it out. Again, thank you so much for sort of joining me on Creating Creators Podcast. My goal in this is sort of to get to know people that are content creators. They're in various pieces of the industry. In my last episode, I actually talked to John Champion, and he spoke with me about who inspired him, and you were one of the people that he mentioned. And then from there, I reached out and you've obliged to be on the podcast. So I really appreciate it. If you would, let's start off, and I'm going to get you to just sort of introduce yourself a little bit, but I'll sort of prompt a lot of things with some questions and images.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, tell me, and feel free to touch on any of these photos that you see here. And tell me who is the real Sean Kirby. And before you get started, let me go ahead and state that there's another Sean Kirby DP out there who I actually mistakenly reached out to originally. And he's even said that he's willing to be on the podcast as well. So he was nice enough and gracious enough to correct my mistake, and then also let me know that he's willing to be on it. So I'm sure y'all have probably run into each other before.
Yeah, there's actually three of us, from what I understand. There's two of us that are Patrick Kirby, which is kind of what I go with professionally. And then there's one that's Sean Kirby. He does documentaries. Patrick Kirby is an older fellow from, I think, Pacific Northwest. And I know that because I was on a job years and years ago, and my name was on a call sheet, and the director, I think, came up and was just like, are you Sean Patrick Kirby? I was like, that's me. And he was like, oh my gosh, that's my friend. So, I'm a director of photography. I'm originally from a small town in South Alabama. But yeah, who's the real me? I mean, that's a big question. Who's the real, anyone? I don't know. I'm me. Just me. Those are photos from years and years ago, different stages of life. Looks like most of those are Halloween pictures. I believe those are three different Halloween outfits I had. One might be a Day of the Dead one, but yeah, that's
right.
Those pictures are, those pictures are super old. Those are kids I think that's before, maybe the top one. I think the top one, I was dating my wife at the time, but the other two were not. I think I was just lost in the wind, just dark times, man. Dark times.
Okay. All right. Well, I can understand that. Those dark times definitely shape us and definitely probably make us more appreciative when the sun rises, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do typically dig pretty deep back into social media, so you'll definitely see a little bit of stalker on Instagram kind of vibe going with this. So I apologize, and hopefully that doesn't make you too uncomfortable.
No, I will say though, I will caveat, and you don't have to put this in, but I just for you, Brian, I'm not necessarily what I'd call a content creator. That's kind of like, that kind of makes me feel weird. Content is, in my personal opinion, like just filler, like something to kind of opiate for the masses. I hope that I'm making more, or try to make more. I mean, we all kind of fall prey to that. And then I'm also, I think if not saying that you would say this, but if anyone ever calls me a videographer, I'm like, I'm done. Like, that's not what I've spent, that might sound pretentious or highbrow, but I spent a long time in this business, working my way up from the bottom, being dirty, being nasty, bleeding, working for tons of people to be a cinematographer. And I think when someone potentially calls me like, oh, you do videography, I'm just like, oh boy, I have to like shut off. So you don't have to put that in, but just to preface, I just thought about that, like preface, oh, hey, that's two things that are like kind of touchy for me
I get
personally.
that.
It might be an ego or, like pride or hubris, but it's definitely like, it makes me feel cringy if someone approaches me in that format. So just for a
Yeah.
preface for that. Yeah.
Well, if you are okay with it, I would love to leave some of that in there, if not all of it in there, mainly because I think it helps us understand. First of all, let me say that I'm still trying to figure out exactly where I'm going with this podcast, and I know I'm calling it Creating Creators. I do believe that you are a creator. Like you've created things. You work with a team of people creating a beautiful image, beautiful videos. I myself, I'm not much of a word kind of person very often. I consider myself a videographer, but at the same time, I also haven't been doing it as many years as you have in the world of video. Speaking of, I love the fact that going through your social media, it felt like a history of like video creation, film creation in Birmingham, because so many of the people that I see now that are, leaders in their industry in the Birmingham area, I think of John Champion, I think of, his name's escaping me right now, but the Allagrip guy.
Oh,
Seth, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And a few other people that I see, even the Cedar Creative guys, like I see you and them when y'all were first starting, or at least what looks like to me, maybe at least in the early stages of it, when y'all were just getting dirty, but you were creating some really beautiful things. And it's really neat to see that history of it in Birmingham. I'm relatively new to video. I say relatively compared to y'all. I was actually a teacher. I just turned 40, so that gives you an idea of my age. But I was teaching. I went to college to be a history teacher, and then started teaching history. Taught it for 8 years, 7 years. And then I got the switch to do career tech, where I was able to teach marketing. And in that, I taught video and photography. And in that, I fell in love with doing it. And now I do it full time for a school system.
That's cool.
As a videographer, as a content creator in a lot of ways. But what started this podcast was me reaching out to some friends and trying to find out, okay, what inspires you? Because these were friends that inspire me in my videography, filmmaking journey. And so I asked them, who inspires you? And then I talked to that person and I'm like, okay, well, who inspires you? And then so on and so forth. And I've gotten to you right now, which is a lot further in the cinematography, a lot further in the film world than I ever thought I would go. But I do think ultimately what's neat is what you create, but not only what you create, but the people you work with, you inspire to make the stuff that they're making. Like you've made an impact on people with maybe the stuff you've made in the past and even what you're making now. And that's sort of what I want to focus on with this. I want to get to know the people that are inspiring people and then find out those people's journeys.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, man.
So, sorry, that was a long ramble.
No, I think that's fine. No, I think that's good. I mean, it's good to have like process that information and, yeah, I think that we can dive in and gosh, I mean, like there's so much philosophical, like there's a lot of places that I probably will go and talk about, but it's just because it's making images is this weird thing of, I don't know, it doesn't really have like one pipeline necessarily, or like one like, okay, this is the thing that like inspires me, or this person inspires me. There's like just a amalgamation of different I guess not even media, but like life and things that just kind of forms or informs me, or how I see it. So anyway.
Yeah.
go
John
crazy.
Champion. Well, and we've got slides that'll sort of prompt me along with my questions that I have for
Okay.
you. But at any point we want to diverge from that, that's fine. I want to be conscious of your time and respectful of that because I know both of us have families that we
Yeah.
owe some respect of their time to and
Right.
ourselves to. But anyway, I do want to mention John Champion mentioned in ours when he looks around for how to light a scene, he always goes back to what naturally happens. Like just look at space. And I think that's sort of what you're saying is you look at life for inspiration. And so I think that's probably obviously what we're all trying to imitate whenever we tell a story, whenever we capture a photo, or whenever we capture a video or something on film. Like we're trying to imitate what we experience in our own life in real
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. We're trying to, it's well, John, that's why one of the reasons why John and I like work so well together is, well, we have history and we're like old war buddies, but also like we kind of come from the same uh, kind of philosophy of lighting when it comes to that. Just what is going on already. Because a lot of times what we're trying to do is emulate or extend the thing that's already occurring in a way that allows consistency, for filming. Um, but I really think, yeah, like capturing that, like an image, capturing an image is, it's like you're trying to time travel by grabbing this thing and like feeling this thing and like making it feel, I don't know, like give it texture, give it something like I remember reading this one time. This author, it's an author or songwriter, basically said like the great books or the great things that like you hook into are things that relate to you in a way that is like universal, but not me saying word for word, like, here's how I feel. It's like poetry. It's this idea of, um, hey, you're not alone. Like don't, like I'm there too. I've been there. Or like you're just trying to capture, like, when you're taking photos of your kids, or when you're taking photos of your family. I think once upon a time I did it because I was like, oh, I want to show people this. And over the past year or two, it's actually been like, no, this is just for me. This is just for me. This is a way for my brain. This is like a firewall or a backup for my brain. So when I get older and the memory maybe is faded, or it's just, some innocuous Tuesday afternoon, and it's just like a good moment. And it's this fine, like I want to capture that moment and have that moment and like relive that moment and be like, oh my God, I can't believe, so much life has occurred. Where did it go? How did it happen? And at the same time, within the idea of like capturing a moment is also knowing like sometimes it's okay not to. Sometimes it's okay just to experience it and soak it in. There was my favorite band retired last August from 20 years of playing music, and I'd probably seen them like, I don't know, 20 times. And I went to their show. It was in Philadelphia, and I was like, talking to my wife. She's like, "You should go." I was like, "Yes, I'm gonna go." And so I go. I met a friend from college who I hadn't seen in a decade, and he and I went to this show together. And I purposely was just like, I saw all these people with their phones, and everyone's like, constantly recording and inputting and broadcasting and da 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 da. And for a moment, I was like, you know what? Tonight's for me, and I'm just gonna like soak it in, and like I'm gonna turn on that like camera in my brain and just like experience people and experience the present, exist in the present, in the moment, and like see how that affects me. And
Yeah.
I am so thankful that I had that cognition to do that, to be able to not do the impulsive thing, which is, take your phone out or your device and like just snap 1,000 pictures and be lost in here when it's really up there. And I don't know. I think in the same way, like that's kind of a way that I kind of, when I have younger DPs or younger people, filmmakers in the business, they ask me like, oh, how do you light what you do? And how do you choose this or that and the other? And I'm like, honestly, here's what I would say: go and live your life. Do not take a camera with you. Go to another country, fall in love, get your heart broken, make a mistake, scrape your knees, like live life, like just live, experience life, and experience it in a way that isn't for someone else. That isn't for, oh, I hope I get a lot of likes on this, or I hope people comment and think that it's pretty. Like, just go and live it, and just, maybe take a film camera, take a 35 millimeter with you, like a rangefinder, and just snap some photos if you want to. But there's a discipline. I think there's a discipline to restraint, and there's a simplicity in that of like, okay, it's easy for me, especially with the technology we have, to just blast every living second I have with a recording of that moment. Blah, 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 blah. And at the end of it all, like, did I really live it? Like, did I really experience it, or did I just like experience it through the lens? And, maybe that's just something I've been thinking about in the past 2 years, but it's really something that's permeated kind of the way that I create and the way that I think about creating images, just as like restraint, and like what's the least amount that we can do to give us the most impactful idea. And I don't know if that's probably a lot. I have a tendency to ramble sometimes, but there's a stream of conscious where I'm like, oh, this makes sense to me.
No,
But that's kind of,
I really, no, I totally agree, and am thankful that I myself grew up in a time where I didn't have social media or a camera with me all the time. I mean, in some ways, I look back. My wife and I, we started dating on my 16th birthday, and like I said, I just turned 40. We're about to have our 20th anniversary, so we've been together a long time. And in some ways, I look back and I'm like, man, I wish. Like, we have a wedding video that I was looking at recently, and I'm so thankful for that wedding video. And in some ways, I wish I had like audio of our talking during the wedding at one moment. Which, I've shot weddings now, so it's like I would have mic'd them. I would have had that audio. But we had some friend in the balcony with a cheap camcorder, right? So in some ways, I wish we had moments that we could go back and relive. We've got some photos. We've got, a couple of clips here and there. But for the most part, there's a whole lot of our lives that was never documented by film. But there also wasn't that constant pressure of, who am I doing this for? We lived our lives because we were living our lives. We enjoyed each other. We got to know each other in ways that social media would have broken. You know what I mean? Potentially. And so I agree with you. I agree that probably one of the best things for us all to do, regardless of the work we do, is to put down the cameras and enjoy a moment, or feel the moment, even if it's not enjoyable. It may be painful. Those shape us and make us into who we are even more so than those good moments that we flash on social media.
I agree. Yeah, I think shared experiences without the prompt of showing off what that experience is, it can be revelatory. And I think too, yeah, like, I don't know, like it is kind of a reversal of ideas. Like, don't take so many pictures. Don't do all this stuff. Like, just be. But there is something interesting about just being, because you see how the light falls. You experience the emotion of the moment. You feel how you feel. You see how other people are. And I really think that when you do get into narrative work, when you do get into kind of other forms of making things, like, I think that informs you. I think that it is storytelling, and it's like, how do I make someone feel? For instance, it wasn't a healthcare thing, but I did a long form for Ivy League school, and one of the things that we were shooting were we were going to a hospital, and there was going to be a newborn there, and we were going to shoot that. And my daughter at the time was 2, and there was a photo that I had taken of her when she was born that just really like struck me. And so I was like, I'm gonna use that as inspiration for this thing because it's a motive to me, like this baby's first kind of fill in the blank. And I kind of fought for it. I was like, hey, I really think that I want to get this, and you should, like, if it makes sense for the edit, like, I'd love to see it in there because it is a love letter to my daughter. It is a love letter to, my partner, my wife. Um, it is like saying, like, I experienced that in my way, and here I am, like, putting it out there. Like, it's just this kind of, it's not necessarily a one-to-one, but um, it is a part of, like, that is a part of, like, that creating is, uh, when you are experiencing, yeah, I mean, yeah, I took the photo and now I want to recreate the photo. So I'm not saying don't take pictures, but I'm just saying, like, we have such a propensity to just not be. And I think being can be peaceful once you get past the white noise that you're not supposed to be just being. You just need to be, like, you need to be content creating, you need to be producing, you need to, like, have a brand, you need to, like, all these things. And it's just like, I'm older than you are. Uh, and I remember, yeah, I mean, half my life, no social media. And so I've really kind of tried to, as much as you can in 2023, reverse engineer a little bit and try to not necessarily be, like, completely analog, but, like, okay, like, what are ways that I can get back to that time that feels a little, I guess, simpler. That's just so stupid. I mean, no time is ever simple. It's always complicated, but nostalgia makes it feel that way. But, like, how did I exist in the day to day, and, like, what are parts and pieces of that are healthy that I can, like, reestablish in my present that, like, lend to a healthier understanding of the world and also of myself and in relation to others. So anyway, that's
I think this is a bit of therapy, and I'll admit it's therapy for me because I've got right now children upstairs, and I've got some that are still at school right now, but I have 4 kids, and two of them are about to turn 16. And the idea has definitely captured me that there's so much of their lives that is ahead of them that won't be lived in this house. And there's also each moment that they're in this house is like just moving us closer to that. And yet there's so many times where the moments they're in this house are not, like, I'm either I'm distracted by something and I'm not really embracing it and even just soaking it in, or I'm angry and frustrated about something. You know what I mean? Like, or even worse, maybe it's a good moment and I'm behind the camera distracted by something else, a physical object. So I think what you're saying, at least for me, is therapy. So, and it's something that is sort of convicting that I need to put the camera down. And I think at times, we all have ebbs and flows in our behavior and our lives in general. So there's times that I do better and there's times I do worse. There's times where I'm sitting in my office and doing a podcast when maybe I should be spending time with my kids. But at the same time, there's also work that we've got to do. So I think there's finding that balance, finding that health, but also, like you said, like, it doesn't mean go completely analog, but at the same time, just be conscious of it. And I think people can learn from that and sort of tone things back a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I
So,
mean, to each his own. I know for me and through my therapy, it has definitely been good to experience the now and exist in the present with my wife and my kids and with myself. I mean, like, there's, I don't know, it's so nice to just be like, I'm not going to be on my phone. I won't take work calls after a certain time. Like, like I just won't do it. Like, I used to do it, and I think when COVID happened in 2020, it really changed my perspective about me and, like, what my roles are. And what is work? Like just, bigger, like bigger kind of questions of like, what are we doing? What is this? What's the point? And, I had gotten in this business, I guess, God, 2007. Seth actually got me into it as a PA, a production assistant on like this internet cooking show. And then the Occupy Wall Street, the housing crisis happened in like '08. And the show went from being pretty consistent to not at all. And then he and I started hustling and making kind of web videos for people. And that kind of progressed. And then I started working on, or we both started kind of working on commercials, more commercial work. And then he got his truck and started getting his gear working. And I kind of started, moving this way. And slowly but surely, I knew I always wanted to do. When I got into business, I was like, I think I want to be a director of photography. I think I kind of looked back. I was like, I think that's what I want to do. It makes sense for my past, with the things that I like, how I'm wired. And so I started doing that. I met Champ through a movie on a feature. I was a dolly grip, and then we started doing some movies together. And then we kind of both kind of rose up through the ranks. And I say all that to say is that because of COVID, I mean, I'd spent 13 years just nose down, dedicated, like drive. I didn't meet my wife until 2013. So, I had 6 years where it was just me. And this was like my whole obsession, like this thing, like I was practicing knots at home. I was reading, I was watching things. I was constantly trying to like just be the best. And then we had kids, and then COVID happened. And all of a sudden I realized like, oh my gosh, like I am watching my family from afar. What is my role? I thought it was like, oh, I'm the provider. I just go and work. And, I help do this and then that changed. And I think I'm not thankful for all the hardship that it brought on the entire world, but I am thankful for the perspective that it gave me, to try to start looking at it differently. And I will say, ultimately, it only made me better and I don't like calling myself this, but as an artist or a creator, like it only made me better because I started saying no. I didn't take every job. I started staying home. I started doing things for myself. I started doing, I just like switched my perspective of like, why do I work? What is work? Like, it used to be like work was my life. Like it was like the thing that I've cared for so much. And then I fell in love, and then I got kids. And through like, honestly, like a lot of failures, I learned that work is not life. And I don't have to take every job. And honestly, like if I do that, it makes my work worse because I'm not focused on the project at hand, but also like my personal life, my family. And I think it just gave me a really good perspective. And it's been it's been 3 years of me slowly course correcting. And I wouldn't say it was like 100% success rate. Like it happened, the flip, I switched, hit the switch and it flipped, and I'm like, oh, nope, got it figured out. Like it's a slog. It's learning. It's a learning curve. But like I have found ultimately, when I do take a project, it is fulfilling. And sometimes the money's good and sometimes it's not, but I kind of came up with like and it's not like I created this concept. Like I'm sure I've heard it somewhere else and I just use it for my own kind of merit. But it's like I'll say yes to a job if the idea is cool or good, if there are cool people involved, or if there's like good money. And it has to hit two of the three. It's very like it has to hit two of the three. And sometimes it's cool people and cool project, and the money's okay. But ultimately, like I feel fulfilled doing it. And I mean, that is a privileged statement to be like, oh, I only take jobs that I really like. Like that is very privileged, and I understand that there's privilege that can come from that. But it's been more of like, okay, well, there's no plan B. This is what I'm doing. Like this is what we're doing. So I'm going to like I'm gonna take work, but I'm gonna just be very selective about what I do on purpose because I am like my name is on there. Like the visual is gonna be correlated to me. So I still want it to look great. I still want it to like I still want it to feel good and be a good thing to see or watch, but I don't necessarily just have to like every time someone calls me up, I'm like, yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, let's go, let's go. So I can like spend time with my family. I can be at the home. I can, I don't know, be present. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think I can only imagine in this industry especially when your brand or the type of work you're doing is in demand. I can imagine it can be pretty endless in what you can tie yourself up with. So you have to pull yourself back. I mean, I think that's in anything. Money is always a desire to some degree. Work is always something that people can do. You can get another job or you can add more work to your plate at times. And I think we have to learn to sort of throttle that back and sort of, we have to do some things, but then there's times where we don't. And we have to make that choice. Do we do this for the benefit, or do we not for this other benefit,
Right.
and I think that's sort of what you're saying there. And I agree. It's always a difficult thing to sort of balance, especially that whole work life. I think work life balance has always been difficult. Well, you've touched on this idea about your journey already, about how you became a director of photography. Can you tell me, just in your words, what a director of photography is? Like, how do you classify your job?
So, director of photography or cinematographer is someone who works pretty hand in hand with the director and the production designer, if there is one, helping to craft the visual part of the project that you're doing. So, a lot of times that looks like um, creating lighting scenarios and also camera movements or lack of camera movements, choosing camera systems, choosing lenses, um, and then also choosing your lighting package and your grip package. Usually you have three departments underneath you, camera, grip, and electric, so that you are coordinating with those people like, here's where I want the camera. Here's what lens I want on the camera. Here's where I'd like the light to come from. Let's do this. Let's shape the light this way. Oh, I actually do want the camera to move. So, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? So, and you work hand in hand with the director. You're collaborating with the director. He says like, I want this, to feel isolated. That as an example. And so then you use that sentence and you are like, okay, what does that mean in the scope of this work? Like, how do we do that from lighting and lensing? And then you talk to them about it, and you talk about like what's your inspiration, like what images, like what are the things that inspire you, and you just kind of like work together. And then if there's a production designer, and then you say, hey, so you're going to build this wall, could you do this to the wall, or could you like add like run some electrical on it, this, so that we can plug in and do this. So it's kind of fun. It's like being a quarterback, but you're not the quarterback, or you're like a coach but you're not the head coach, but you are important. It kind of feels like right now, or the past like maybe 5 or 6, maybe 10 years, mainly probably because of apps like Instagram that are very, or they used to be like all about the image. I feel like the director of photography has kind of gotten like buzzy. It's like, ooh, you're a DP, and it's like, yeah, but it's still a job. It's still this thing that we have to do. So, um, I
It's Sorry, I
You
don't
want me to
mean to cut you
pause?
off.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, like, there's one specific film that I've actually talked, because I talked with Cedar Creative, I talked with
Hmm.
John Champion, now I'm talking with you, and the one that sort of all of y'all have sort of worked on, I guess, relatively recently. I say relatively within the last few years, is Relic, and it's really neat to hear the at least the two different perspectives on it already, because when I think of John's job being the lighting, and grip, I think he had to have been heavily involved in every single shot. And I even went through at one point with him and asked him about a couple of scenes, and I was like, what did you light this with? And he was like, we lit it with the stuff that was in the shop.
Hmm.
It's neat to hear the three different people or groups that I've talked with, how all of y'all contributed to the ultimately to the end product. You had the story, you had the lighting or the use of the lighting that was already there, and then you had somebody like you that was obviously there, pretty instrumental in, all right, what lens are we going to use? What kind of movements are we going to have here or there? What's the color that we want to cast in this moment, or at least capture in this moment? All of that is really neat. If you don't mind, just touch on this film, if you're okay with doing that, and maybe touch on a little bit of that as far as, like, because you've already talked about director of photography, but at the same time, those images that are so popular on Instagram, there were a lot of people that impacted what that final image looked like.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a team. It's a team effort, and it's always good to have multiple brains kind of like tackle something. But for instance, like even that, so this whole piece kind of started. Um, this piece started where John and I, and then another guy, Mike Falco, we were in Miami doing a job together, and we were just like, I really want to do a car job. I really want to do a car commercial, and we kind of came up with this like very broad idea. And I was like, well, let's bring it to Ethan at Cedar and see if he can do it. So I think it was December when we did that, and then we shot this in February. Of the like, 3 months later, that location that's on playing right now, I had driven by it for years, and it just always thought it was a super cool location. I was like, oh my God, it's got so much texture.
Is it in
And
Alabama?
yeah, it's in Birmingham. I don't know if
Oh,
it's
wow.
there. I don't know if it's there anymore, but
Okay.
and then I just saw it from the street, and then when we went in there and looked at it, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. So anyway, we start putting this thing together, and Ethan kind of fleshed the story out, found talent. John and I kind of like worked through this. I think we found a car, and I would say that every frame of this is something that I'm very proud of. The whole top to bottom, like I love how it looks. I'm very simplicity is something I strive for in an image. Simplicity and something like visually that's interesting or has texture. I'm all about something that feels raw and real. And a lot of times, yeah, like I would say, majority of this entire piece was lit practically. I think at the very beginning, we had put some Asteras in to do a flicker effect as the lights turn on. Um, yeah, like that's just the normal flow. And we just I was like, oh, let's turn this one off. Let's turn this one on. Yeah, it's just all practical. And, the one that's on the title page of her putting the jacket on, that's kind of got the light in the heater.
Yeah, yeah.
I was literally walking through the shop while we were filming, and I saw the heater and the color of the heater, and I was like, oh, we should shoot something right there. I was like, we should shoot something right there. And I think like because of the way we were making it, which is very unusual for both Ethan and even me, this is like the script had a very rough skeleton idea, and then we went and filmed a bunch of pieces. We're like, okay, we're going to do something here, do something here, do something here. And then Ethan just like worked on the edit to try to make a story, and it actually turned out really. I mean, we had a through line that we knew, and we had a
Right.
skeleton, but it wasn't very fleshed out as in terms of like here's here's where we start and here's where we end. Like we knew where we were starting and where we're ending, but we weren't really sure the middle. But yeah, so all that is that we just put in a stair up and we matched the color of the heater
Hmm.
and just turned all the other lights off. So
It looks
um,
great.
yeah.
That's a great shot. The poem in the editing, the poem that he introduced into it, to me really
Mm-hmm.
just like solidifies the story. We talked about that with Cedar. Now we do have to talk about the fact that I don't know. This was probably not your acting debut, but I
No.
understand you are the father in this.
Well, the reason that happened was, I mean, so we're making a spec piece, which means there's
Right,
no
right,
money, right? There's no
right.
money. So I called in pretty much every favor I had. So John and Mike were going to come and do it, but I called in my buddy Todd out of Ohio, and Drew has a Steadicam, a Trinity Steadicam, and Todd worked at a camera rental house, and Drew also had a Ukraine arm pursuit car, which is what you see traveling around here. So uh, I called him up and was like, "Hey, this is the one, my one freebie. I'm not going to ask you for one again. Will you come shoot this thing with me? It'll be really fun. You know, it won't be like a normal commercial. We're gonna like there's no one else on top. We are up top. So everyone kind of came down and we shot this over the weekend. But so my brother was supposed to come originally and play the the father, and my daughter is the little girl in it at the time.
Right.
And my dad actually plays the older version of me because we were just trying to figure out like, okay, what's this, a simple way of like figuring like solving this problem. Okay, well, my dad, and then my brother, like this is great, and then my brother dropped out last minute, so it was like, well, I guess I got to do it. There's no one else, so we had operators, and Ethan can operate really well. So just when I was when I was having to act, which is not something that I necessarily, it's not something I really like doing. I like being behind the camera. But it was a necessity, and it was just like, well, this is the only way for this thing to work. Like in that car, for instance, like that car, which was really the only thing that we paid for on that piece. That car was barely holding on. I think we spent 4 or 5 hours on our car day trying to get it to crank and work.
Oh, wow.
And Mike Falco, who was the key grip on the job, thankfully is also pretty handy with cars, and he went out there and like made it work. But we lost a lot of time on that day because you rent this car, you're like, okay, great, we'll drive it around, blah blah blah. And that location that we were at, that's another one that I had known of from doing other work in the past, and I was like, I'm
You
pretty
talking about
sure we.
the quarry?
Yeah, it's a sand and
Yeah.
gravel place. Yeah, Wade Sand
Yeah.
and Gravel, and
It looks great.
yeah, I had done two other things there, and I just, you just keep good locations in your pocket. And I was like, I'm pretty sure we can do it for free there, because that was the name of the game. Is like, how much can we get away with at the, while still being safe, but how much can we get away with and maintain the least amount of cost? And so that was that was our that's what we did, and I'm very proud of it. Like it's one of my favorite things I've ever made, top to bottom. It's like it evokes strong senses for me.
It's one of my favorite videos I think I've ever seen, especially considering it's out of Birmingham, and I mean it's just a great story in and of itself. Speaking of Birmingham, I do have to ask because you just going through your social media again, stalking you
Mm-hmm.
for way too long on there. I did see quite a bit of romance towards Birmingham. So talk about, I mean, because I would imagine you've had the opportunity, if you wanted to travel elsewhere. I mean, Atlanta has a lot of film work. Birmingham hasn't been known for film. What is it about Birmingham that captures your attention to be able to post so much about it, but then also like what's kept you here and what's made you keep this as home? You said you were born or you're from Alabama, but a small town in Alabama, right?
Yeah. So, it's a good question. I'll say this first of all, like I never, for me, this probably ties into being from the South and being a filmmaker and all that. Like, I want every image that I make to blow people away. And it's probably like an underdog thing within me. Like, oh, that person's from where? Like that to me is like, I believe that it's like you can make a good image and tell a good story. Like, you can make something that looks like it's shot in LA or New York. Like, you can do those things. It's not easy, but it's possible. And so it's really like about like, hey, listen, just because we're not there doesn't mean that we can't make a great image. We can't, like, that's not equivalent. Like, being there doesn't equal that. I think you can be a good photographer and a good creator anywhere. So sorry, I'm just checking the time.
Yeah, you're good.
I moved to Birmingham because my brother at the time and my best friend were there, and I had moved around a lot after college, and decided to settle there and kind of start life over. And I don't know, in a lot of ways, I would say Birmingham is where I didn't grow up there. I wasn't like a kid there and like rode a bike, but it is a place where I feel like I became a human. And it's the place where I met my partner, my wife. Like, it's the place where we had our kids. They were born there, and so it's a place that, I don't know, it's always special because it's like just this small town, and the community that we work in is really tiny. But it's like, hey, just because it's small doesn't mean you can't make the best stuff possible. So I think there's an underdog mentality to that as well. Like, you want people to like kind of not think that you can do something good because you're from somewhere, and it's kind of really fun when you get to show that up. But yeah, I'd say that the affinity for Birmingham is because it's where I grew up, like where I became an adult and became a father and a husband. And like the industry, that's where I started at, in Birmingham. So it holds a lot of special significance for us. We moved actually from Birmingham a little over a year ago to Nashville. Just wanted to change it up, but we still miss it a lot. I think we're traveling when the kids get home from school. We're traveling this weekend, and we're going to go through there, and we're probably going to eat at our favorite restaurant. It'll always be home. It'll always be, for my wife and I, it'll always be special. And we talk about moving back there, and there's a chance that we might. I don't know what the future holds. My brother lives up here now, and I just wanted to be close to him and just change the scenery, change the pace. So.
Yeah. Well, Birmingham, I've lived 30 minutes outside of Birmingham pretty much my whole life, and went to UAB for my undergrad and master's. So I definitely love Birmingham. I think that it's, especially in photos, I think it always looks great. But I think that's with any town or city. I think there's beauty in it. Obviously the world that we talked about earlier that we're trying to imitate or at least reproduce or capture, it's beautiful everywhere. It's just you gotta open your eyes and see it. But all right, how would you describe your work? And this, I do want to be conscious of your time. I know we've already been on here a little while. I think you've described a good bit of your work. What I've seen just as I go through, and this is a really convoluted slide I see now as I'm looking at it.
No, I'm tracking.
Yeah, but what I've seen is I see that whole idea you mentioned earlier about looking natural. You wanted sort of grit or texture to your imagery. I see a heavy use of shadows. Now, obviously, I've got my settings on my phone that I screen captured here on the dark mode. I typically feel like it's easier for me to see things, but even without that, just your images, you don't mind the shadows, and that's something that I've had to learn to appreciate in video, or just capturing an image, is be okay with information being lost in the shadows.
Well, yeah, I
Can you
mean,
talk towards that at all?
I think that it's just the way that I see the world. Like, I kind of have this philosophy of like a light shines in the darkness, and the darkness, won't overcome it, and I think what that means is that a lot of people think that if you put, a pinprick in a piece of paper, you're going to be distracted by all the negative, but your eyes going to be drawn to the one hole of light. And I kind of look similarly to that idea of, it's not necessarily how much light you put on something, but it's the shape that you create that creates drama and cinema, and that has a realness to it. And I think that, at least in my brain, the negative, or the darkness, is just a reflection of the space or the story, not necessarily like always necessary, but I think that it just lends to like maybe like a heaviness or like a weight. I also like, it's the idea of texture and like kind of realness is, I try as much as possible to like things as practically as I can. Obviously, you create and craft, but I found in my experience before I became a cinematographer, a lot of times you get tasked with recreating the thing that already exists, and it just felt like a big kind of time suck. And it was just like, well, what if we just do it this way? Like, what's the worst? Like, oh, it's a little green. Well, that's okay. I love movies from the 70s and the 80s. Like, I love grit and texture. I like grain. Like, I like imperfection. I really feel like I like an image that feels like it's falling apart because it feels real. There feels like there's something at stake when that's happening, and it's not perfect. And I think what my philosophy from lighting is, like I said, light shines in darkness, but also like there's perfection and imperfection. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect all the time. You should let it feel what it feels the best. And I think that that's a question I always ask on set a lot, is like, what do we want to feel? Why are we doing this? It's a lot of like, it's not necessarily like the tools of how to do it. I know those tools. I spend a lot of time coming up and learning those tools. And so really the question is like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing it? What is the feeling of it? And that informs how you make it and shape it and, craft it. But a lot of times, yeah, like, I don't know, this is how my brain works. So if I'm sitting here and this side of my face, which is a little contrasted now because the window's here, if this was darker, right, and you couldn't see my eye, you couldn't see my cheek and my ear, my arm, you could just see like bits and pieces of it. In my opinion, my brain knows that there's something there. I know that the rest of the whole of a person exists in that shadow and shape. So instead of trying to lift it up, I just embrace it, because I'm like, well, yeah, like I like that look and I like that. And like, I'm inferring that human exists in the shadow as well as the light. And maybe that's something about how we are as humans, like you can exist in both. And so it's really kind of more about its taste. It's the way I like things to look, but it's also, yeah, there's, it's always a little deeper that you can mine it and be like, well, my favorite images that I've seen of people make, I feel like are silhouettes and things that are in shade and shadow. And I'm drawn to that. So I think that is a natural, I would not say that anything I'm doing is trying to recreate or copy, but it's definitely heavily inspired by better makers than me.
John talked about one of the tricks that, I guess, or one of the realization moments he had in his like job, I guess, and made it easier, is realizing that backlighting is so important. And I think that's sort of a little bit towards what you're getting to, like creating a silhouette and identifying, okay, that's a great starting point, and maybe the end as well, or just adding those, like bring the light around a little bit and just allow the what would naturally happen if we weren't even here, allowing a little bit of that to progress further, to give a little bit more shape to the form or something. It was really neat in my mind. I wish I would have asked him more about that, but it was one of those things where it was like, start with the backlight, like start with almost a silhouette and then build from there. And for me, it's that, don't feel like every single shadow needs to have light shining in it. Like you're saying, like let the light part overcome the shadow part in the mind. Doesn't always have to in the shot.
Yeah, I mean, because in the world, like the physics of light make it impossible to eliminate shadow. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, the idea of like, oh, I can't have shadow. I'm like, but that's not how our world exists. Like, there's a shadow on the moon. Like, you know, like we can't escape the light and the dark. So instead of escaping it, what if we just embraced it? What if we leaned into it and thought about it in terms of, oh, it's too dark? It's just like, well, what if it's just light in the right spots? What if that's what we're trying to achieve? Like, what if I'm just trying to carve?
You mentioned earlier the idea of how you enjoy film, or at least like a sort of a raw image. And I think, am I correct in the Relic being shot on film, or
No.
was it, there was something recently y'all shot on film that I heard about because at some point y'all ran out of film and had to go, was that the music video?
So I did the thing.
It was with Cedar that I'm thinking of.
I shot a couple things with Grayson on Super 16, but we did a boxing spec where I had one can of 500T in Super 16, so I had 12 minutes, just one can, extra can, and I was like, hey, do you just want to like make some stuff? So we did. We just kind of came up with some ideas, and we're like, let's just do cool stuff. And you know, I do love shooting on film. It's been a while since I've did it. No, the Relic was on the Venice. It was on the Venice with Vista Primes and Kawa Anamorphics mixed.
Okay, all right. I think it was just edited with the
we leaned into that film. I think Ethan and I share a very common aesthetic that we really, really enjoy film, and that's really kind of. So leaning into it from that. Oh wow, you brought up that. That's funny.
So I actually was about to pull up this, which I think is this the spec ad you're referencing?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So this was shot on film.
Yeah, we shot that on 500T.
And what I was getting to before we talk about 1999, what I was about to ask is, do you notice a big difference in like the contrast and in shadows specifically when you're shooting on film? Like, is there a big difference in what you see there?
No, I mean, I think that you still have to you have to definitely protect your shadows more in film. I mean, that's what they tell you to do, but also like, I don't know, man, like that's what you're supposed to do, but also like, you learn the rules to break the rules and like what it feels right. Now you have to use your meter a lot more, you know, like you're monitoring with an eyepiece or with like a comp monitor. That's just for composition. Like all that is just exposure and reading the meter and knowing like, here's where I'd like to live. Here's where I'd like to live. Like, let's see. And like for this one, honestly, it was like I want to push the film. I want to see how close we can get to under if we'll still be good. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. It looks pretty much exactly like I was inspired by the movie Widows that Sean Bobbitt shot and who Tom Poole colored. So that was a lot of our like kind of me and Grayson's kind of visual kind of inspiration was the movie Widows. And then a friend of mine, Parker Jarvie, colored it. So we all kind of were like, oh, yeah, that's what we wanted to go for. I'm really happy with how it turned out.
All right. I'm going to show my, I guess, my lack of knowledge on this stuff, but I've just recently shot my first roll of film. Okay. Now I've got a little double 8mm camcorder film camera that I've had. I ended up picking it up, I think, from a guy for like $35 or something like that. And the film costs about 6 times more to actually get the film and get it processed and get it digitized. Yeah. But I shot my first roll of film and just got it back recently. And I had such a hard time just making sure that I was exposing right. I didn't even know, like, based on the meter that I've got on this little camera, it doesn't really tell me how I'm supposed to adjust based on the type of film I got or the camera. I don't know anything. I'm learning. Thankfully, majority of it turned out great. A few scenes of my son playing baseball were overexposed, but other than that, it actually looks amazing.
Well, you can bring that down. The highlights will be safe. Your highlights, like in film, you have so much latitude. You can probably bring that down unless you're like blown by like 8 stops.
How do you bring it down in post because I'm working with a digital file that somebody else scanned?
You just put it in Resolve, like, as long as you have, like, we can talk about it later off podcast. Right. I got about 5 minutes, by the way.
I get that. Yeah.
But I can email you and tell you, like, how to work with film in post.
Okay. I mean, I do know post work. Like, I use Resolve in editing and color grading and stuff now. But anyway, it was, to me, it blows my mind, the idea of coloring film, because I guess I don't see it as, I feel like there's so much of a digitizing process in order to get it into DaVinci. I don't know how much of that is preserved as far as like flexibility, but I guess it's just, you're just coloring on top of whatever the digital process has.
Yeah, coloring is just a digital version of color timing, what they used to do in the lab. We've just taken it and made it digital. It's ones and zeros, but the idea is still the same. Is you're giving a film a bath, you're getting this, raw back, and then you're looking, like, you're gonna like leave it in for too long or take it out too early, or what light points are you trying to like hit? So it's very similar. It's just that Resolve is the new 21st digital version of that.
Okay. Anyway, all right. Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to talk sometime about that. Talk about I do love 1999. I thought it was great. I watched it, and although the Facebook copy that I can still find is really horrible quality, but I did enjoy even watching it. So props on that. Is this car, is the new car you won still around, or have y'all gotten rid of it by now?
It is. No, it's hard to get rid of. It's hard for me to get rid of it. My wife and I talk about it all the time. But yeah, it's probably pretty soon. But no, it's been great. Lasted for a long time.
Well, congratulations on that. I'm going to just flip through a couple of these real quick. So these were some of the things. I'm sorry, I'm not really great about planning time wise, but these were just some of the things that you've worked on in the past. I was going to ask you what tips you have for this guy, but I think you spoke really great about what you would say to new DPs coming in now. I think a lot of the stuff you talked about, just simply put the camera down and live, go out and experience love, experience heartache, experience hardships, experience joy, happiness. Like, that's the stuff we all need to do, especially I think before we've done that, if that makes sense. And then utilize that to pour into the art that you're creating.
Absolutely.
I want to ask 2 things here. So I want to, and we'll end on these, but what's next for you? I do want to hear about, like, what's your next plans, what's in the near future, anything like that. And then I also want to hear about who inspires you. So that's definitely the goal with this question is, that it leads me to who I'm going to interview potentially next in this
Right.
series. So if it can be somebody that either maybe with your help or something that you can make that connection possible, that would be great. But even if it's not, I still love to hear who inspires you. So what's next and who inspires you?
What's next? Potentially I have a feature coming up in October. Not really sure what's happening because of the strike. I've got some commercial stuff that I'm pretty excited about, some nonprofit work. What's immediately next is that once my kids get home, we're going to the beach. I'm very excited about that.
There you go.
We're going to get them cut out of school a day early and go to the beach for a few days. So I've got to get done. I got to get done to go pack.
Yes.
Who inspires me? Man, I'll tell you this. His name is Dustin Lane. He's an incredible cinematographer. I actually keyed for him when I was still a key grip. Dustin does beautiful work. Ironically enough, he actually lived in Birmingham for a small amount of time because his wife worked for Southern Progress, I think, or for one of their magazines. And he lived in my old loft. And so Dustin and I just bonded, and he's always been a really good advocate for me and my work. But he's a really cool dude too. And I think his work is sublime and beautiful. So I would say he inspires me because the stuff he does feels so effortless in the way it looks, and it has such a quality to it that I wouldn't say there's envy at all, but I'm just in awe because I'm like, man, you're like, it's just another level of what I do, but we might call ourselves the same, but he's just really talented, and I think he's really, really good. And I always enjoy watching what he does. And we chat a lot. We talk about photography and books and being fathers and stuff like that.
Well, I look forward to reaching out to him, and I'll probably reach out to you and ask you just to share,
Sure.
email or something like that I can reach
For
out
sure.
to him through. I would also say that probably who inspires you are your kids, and I think that would be fun to have them on a podcast.
Yeah. No, I mean, one of them would enjoy it. The other one would be like, I'm not doing that.
I get that.
But yeah.
I've got a couple of those. So last thing that I'm going to mention, and then we can work on getting off here. I just watched this music video today, and I really love this video, man.
Thanks.
First of all, again, I think it's really neat when this stuff is shot in Birmingham in locations that I recognize. And so I think that's really neat first and foremost, but then also just, I don't know how much of the storyline that you were a part of, but the visuals of this is so great. The story is so great. I'm assuming she's the actual singer. Like the artist is great, and she does such a great job even just portraying the part throughout. So I just wanted to mention that. Any last comments you have to say about this, if any, and then we'll wrap.
No, that was a fun one to do. Grayson invited me on to shoot that, and we had some really good ideas and tricks how to, it's all about it doesn't matter, no matter the budget, you never have enough money, but you still want it to look at a certain quality level. So
Right.
Thankfully my background allows us to know some hacks into ways of being like, how can we do this in a inventive way? And also my knowledge of Birmingham, I'm like, I know, like I get to be like a secret location scout for at least Birmingham and for most of Alabama, just because I spent so many years there. So anytime there's talk of doing something, I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it. So no, that was a fun one. No, thank you for having me on, and it's always good to talk and talk philosophy and way more about that than it is about the work, like for me anyway. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking the time. I know that you got a lot going on, but I really do appreciate you taking the time and just talking with me. And I think
Absolutely.
what you've shared is very insightful and very helpful, not just in cinematography and the world of a DP, but also just in life in general. So I appreciate you.
Thanks. We're all trying, man.
Yes,
We're
sir.
all just
Yes,
trying.
sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.